Welcome in to the Hot Read Podcast live here on Tuesday, March the 11th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at 440 Sports Podcast Network. You can follow me on all social media platforms at JT_Ruhnke. And Stoney, my friend, we are now into the thick of it, of free agency. And
Here we are.
all here to talk about what the Titans have done and get into what it all means and if the Titans have actually gotten better before compared to yesterday's team. But good to have you here, of course, Stoney Keeley, editor-in-chief of the Sobros Network, one half of Football and Other F Words, and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how are you doing, my friend? How are you managing the chaos so far?
Pretty good. Staying on top of it as best as I can. I feel like it's been a long time since I first sat on this show. I believe it was October, the episode we did where you could see the soul leave my body when I just realized that this team was probably going to stink for 2024. We needed better players. And here we are. We have finally made it, folks. Get your drinks ready to a new player acquisition cycle. So I'm excited. There's something in this room that smells bad, and I can't figure out what it is. So that's kind of bumming me out a little bit. But otherwise, I'm ready to go, man. I'm ready to get this show on the road. Let's get some new blood in this organization.
Yes, and a couple new faces, a couple of faces departing the Tennessee Titans. Excited to talk about all that and more today. Reminder, if you are joining us live over on Twitter or Facebook, do us a favor and head on over to the 440 Sports YouTube channel where you can join so many of you in the chat here today, like Jake, Alex, D. Good, Ed Henry. Good to see you all here. Jake says, I heard Stoney is not re-signing today. Sad day for 440 and Sinkers Beverages. Is that true, Stoney? Is the agents behind the scenes working on getting that extension? Are you asking for a trade? Is that what I'm hearing?
No. It's common mistake. It came out today that fake Stoney was not going to be re-signed with the Tennessee Titans, but real Stoney is going to stay right here on 440. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but my first name is legally Stoney. That is literally my first name. It's not a stage name. None of that. I'm the real Stoney. So I'm fine. You guys are good. Appreciate your concern, but no, I'm sticking with it.
I love to see it. Alex says bonjour. Ed says Stoney, I've got you. Jill in the chat here. Good to see you all today. Here's the thing, right? And of course, we have to, before I get on a diatribe, I want to thank our wonderful and amazing sponsors, ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers and Sinkers Beverages, who sponsor the show, making it free to you every single week. We appreciate them. Check out ML Rose and Sinkers Beverages. More on them later. Here's the thing today, right? We've been talking about this player acquisition cycle for, quite some time. I feel like ever since week 8, we've been so much so that we've said it so much that we started making a drinking game out of it. Every time you said a player acquisition cycle or you said that phrase, you drank. And, of course, it's fun and whatnot. However, we have finally gotten here, right? We are here at this player acquisition cycle. And Zach, with some advice here in the chat for me, and maybe this is, I should heed it, but he says, don't say anything negative. If so, watch your back. My expectations were pretty low. I think they were set pretty low for what we should have expected in free agency. We've heard it all along, and there's still so much time in free agency to go, getting new talent in here to flesh out the roster, I should say. We've heard how they're going to be selective in free agency. It's not going to be this lucrative thing that Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker go through. It's not going to be how they build this team. They're going to build it through the draft. However, I came away from yesterday still just feeling so unsatisfied with the big splash signings that they made. And we're going to talk about those today. And like I said, I don't know, Stoney, we're only what? We're less than 48 hours into free agency. And so there's a lot of time. And I mean, listen, you could be a team like the Cowboys who have not made a signing at all. Like, there are teams out there that are still doing worse than the Titans in terms of getting players in during this acquisition cycle. However, I can't help but feel underwhelmed, and my expectations were very low. How have you seen this first 24 to 36 hours play out, in your opinion?
I have not been necessarily surprised that there haven't been a high volume of moves. I kind of felt like this regime, from what they've been telling us for months now, I kind of felt like they would be the patient bunch, that they would go the prudent route. And so I'm not surprised that there's only been like two major signings for new players. Of course, they bring back Sebastian Joseph Day as well, Otis Reese, Keandre Coburn, Mike Brown, all coming back. Like, that's all well and good, but it's what I have the issue with is just I think it's the dollar amount that is going to Dan Moore Jr., the time commitment, and I know like a 4-year contract is really just a 3-year contract and that sort of thing, but it just kind of feels like I look at the list of available options, and I think there were better players out there, in my opinion, than you guys threw money at, after saying you probably weren't going to just throw money at players. And I think that's, for me, what's been the rude awakening.
Yeah, I think so as well. We're going to get to Dan Moore and Cody Barton and the other guys they've already resigned here in just a second, because I do want to get to the news that broke today about kind of something that shook the Titans Twitter fan landscape, I would say. And that is, of course, there was a report over over on Twitter today from Chris Thomason, I think is how you say his name,
Okay.
Thomason, one of those. I don't know.
Something.
Something like that, where he tweeted out, he works for the Denver Gazette, which, and the tweet said, Agent John Perla tells Denver Gazette that Titans won't tender ex-CSU punter Ryan Stonehouse, and he'll be an unrestricted free agent versus restricted. The lowest tenure for a restricted free agent is $3.263 million. John Perla said to the Denver Gazette as well, thanks to the Titans for the opportunity. We understand teams make difficult decisions and they're going to move on. Ryan Stonehouse followed that up. There was some confusion, like, oh my God, is this the end of Ryan Stonehouse? Or, there was talk as well that this could potentially be same type of thing with what they did with NWI, where they did not tender him, let him walk. He chose the market, and then he comes back on that deal either a year or two ago. But no, it seems like Ryan Stonehouse's time is done. In a tweet, he said, "Thank you, Nashville. I'm so thankful for all my relationships I've made in Tennessee. They will stick with me for the rest of my life. I'm excited for what the future holds." I'm sure he's probably excited not to get blown up every single play by the Indianapolis Colts. That probably helps out there. But yeah, so it looks like the Titans will be creating another hole on their roster, looking for a new punter, looking for a kicker as well, and maybe looking for an entire new special teams unit. And listen, on the Ryan Stonehouse front, I get it, right? The out kicking of coverage is a major issue. I get it. The hang time was a question. It's something that many in the organization were frustrated with a guy like Ryan Stonehouse, right? And whether that is something that you've seen over his development the last 2.5, 3 years, and it just has not gotten better, is fair. Is it fair to say that coming off the injury also didn't help out that much either? Probably. However, there's fault to go around for everyone on special teams, from Ryan Stonehouse to Colt Anderson last year to the rest of the unit. It was a failure on all fronts, and unfortunately, that meant the axe had to come down on the heads of Ryan Stonehouse, Colt Anderson, and they bring in a new regime in John Bones Fassel, which, if you follow the tea leaves between this signing, the signing that happened about 10 minutes before we went live, where the 49ers agreed to terms with Luke Gifford, special teams ace Luke Gifford, it looks like they are gutting this special teams unit. Is it Fossil? John Bones Fassel. I get it
It
now.
is Fossil.
Oh, my bad. But now,
I get it now.
I get it now with the with the nickname. That makes sense. Thank you very much. Yeah, if he wants to gut this special teams unit, that's fine.
Yeah.
However, we were talking this whole season and at the beginning of the offseason how many holes this team realistically needs to fill in free agency. And yet it looks like they're continuing to just make more and more holes in this roster. And so it looks like it looks like this team is yet going to go younger, going to go cheaper at some of these positions and try to churn the bottom of the barrel. And it looks like that they're going to go with John Bones Fassel to lead them in that direction. I see, I get I get why they're moving on from Ryan Stonehouse, right? Coach Will says, JT is a punter. You should never be noticed. You are the product you put on the field. However, I still do think that a lot of the blame goes to Colt Anderson, the people that this regime put around Ryan Stonehouse in terms of the ability to get down the field, and it didn't get better until about week 9 or 10 last year. Like there's failure on all fronts, and it looks like it's better to, instead of continue with Ryan Stonehouse, clean slate and bring in a new system with their new special teams coordinator.
I'm sorry, I just heard something crash in my house, so Lord knows what the cat has gotten into. I'm with you, JT. I feel like this move does kind of signal a willingness to sort of tear it all down. Like, I've been saying it on the show, like they're just going to rip this thing down to the studs and rebuild it. But now, like you said, you've created another hole for yourself. And potentially a second if you don't re-sign Nick Folk, a kicker and a punter. You're adding work to your plate by doing that. But at the same time, I don't think it's the catastrophic move that some people think. When this team needed a really good directional punt with some real hang time in critical moments of a game, there were a few times that Stonehouse really kind of shit the bed in that regard. So I got the frustration with him. It's like taming a wild horse, like you gotta rein that thing in. You gotta rein that leg in. And I don't think that it ever really happened for Stonehouse. And the result is that the Titans are taking the opportunity, since they're rebuilding everywhere else on the roster, to just go ahead and tear the special teams unit down and build it back up from the start as well. So pour one out. Personally, I'm happy that so many people will stop being confused by who the real Stoney in this market is. No, I'm kidding. I'm not. Now's not the time for jokes. Pour one out for Ryan Stonehouse, but when he wasn't announced as re-signing with the team pretty early on in this thing, I started to kind of get that itchy feeling in my stomach. My tummy started rumbling. I'm like, oh, he might be a guy that they move on from. And I don't want to put this into the ether just yet, but I'm kind of starting to get a little, my freak sense is starting to go off. Wait, that's something different. My spidey sense is starting to go off that maybe NWI is not going to be on this team again either, the way they're approaching this free agency.
Yeah, I mean, you would have thought, and I'm sure you're looking at Joe's message here. That's a good one. I do like that one. However, yeah, I agree with you that it seems like this with Mike Borgonzi here, it's a lot about taking it back down to, stripping it all down and getting back to, a baseline. And if that means that guys like Ryan Stonehouse, NWI are not coming back, so be it. However, you still have to field a team in 2025 in some way. And right now, and we'll get into Dan Moore and Cody Barton and others here right now. I don't know if I feel more confident that this team is in a better place. Like, let's say, and we can talk about this too, but my mind has continued to move in the direction that the pick will be Cam Ward. Like, and we've talked about it so much, but let's just say the first pick is Cam Ward, and you
Yeah.
have him on your team. I don't know if the team today, if Cam Ward was on it, is better than the team they put out there last year.
Can I present an alternate explanation here based on what we've seen? And again, this is 100% an overreaction to 24 hours of free agency. But
Yes.
if these moves signal anything, why couldn't they signal that the team is just content with sucking, and therefore they're just not going to have a quarterback at all, and they're just going to try and get draft picks and acquire capital?
Yeah, I agree with you there. Zach in the comments his comment section here saying Jeffrey Simmons calling Ryan Stonehouse an all-pro punter. And so take that as you will here. However, yeah, we should get to the bigger moves here. And before we do that, we can get to some of your comments here. This is a conversation I want to bring up after we talk about some of these guys. I think there is still a divide on what these moves tell for what they do in the draft.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who believe that it is, that these moves signal that it is truly a strip it all down, build through the draft, get capital, and kind of go to next year's draft. Sean O'Reilly saying, can we talk about the 2026 draft already? Like, like people, there's a lot of people who are like already wanting to punt, like Alex saying we drafting number 1 next year as well, given the reaction here. And otherwise there are other comments here who are talking about how this tells us that it may be like a Cam Ward, like building through the trenches to supply Cam Ward with the best protection and whatnot. However, like I don't know where you stand on this right now, Stoney, but to me, this still feels like with the signing of Dan Moore, this is an indication that the Titans are most likely are aiming for Cam Ward to be their choice when it comes down to it on April 24th or 25th, whenever the draft is.
Rephrase your question for me. You asked me, does the signing of Dan Moore indicate that they're trying to protect Cam Ward? They're beefing up the trenches?
Like
Okay.
Signing Dan Moore to me tells me that they're going quarterback. And I feel like this is another step to make sure that for their new quarterback, the protection is great. It's right. And that can't be a reason why he does not succeed for us going forward with their new quarterback.
I don't necessarily think that. I think this is a team trying to plug as many holes with starter caliber players as they possibly can in order to give themselves some sort of liquidity throughout the draft. Like, we can be flexible. We don't have to get this. We don't have to get that. I think there's still a scenario where the Giants offer, out of desperation, a dream package for the Titans to come down to 3. And I don't know if they love Cam Ward enough to stick and pick with, the potential for multiple first round picks on the board. I sincerely hope that the signing of Dan Moore Jr. was not like, yeah, we got him, guys. Like, our offensive tackles are locked down for the next 10 years. This is going to be awesome. Problem solved. I don't think Dan Moore Jr. even really prevents them from going offensive tackle early in the draft. Now, I think what it does is alleviate the pressure for them to be forced to take an offensive tackle maybe earlier than they would have liked to. But I think ultimately it's just to say, we've got a body that can play starter caliber left tackle at left tackle. Therefore, we do not have to get a guy early in this class and hope that he develops quickly enough to be an impact player. And that's kind of, I look at it like that, like nothing more, nothing less than just checking a box off. I really don't think it impacts what the team does at number one at all.
Yeah, that's fair. But getting to Dan Moore here, right? Talking about how he fits in. The Titans, I think it's fair to say they flat out overpaid Dan Moore. I think
Yeah, I
that's
don't.
that's not a matter of opinion. I think this is an overpay. 4 years,
Yeah,
$82 million deal for Dan Moore Jr., former fourth round pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In that 4-year, $82 million deal, where it's about a 20.5 AAV, which is where it was in line with where the reports were on what his money could look like. 50 million guaranteed, with 31 million of that guaranteed in year one. It's a lot of money for someone who, you can look at different metrics. And I know PFF tracks their sacks differently than
yeah,
maybe like a next gen stats or whatever analytics department you want to use for charting and tracking sacks. And there's always the question of, were the sacks more on Russell Wilson? Were they more on Dan Moore? The consensus seems to be that at his best, he can be league average. I
yeah,
think that's the consensus. However, at his best, he was only at his best, which is league average, in that last year of, in his fourth year, after, multiple attempts to replace him with the drafting of Broderick Jones, with the drafting of Troy Fautanu getting hurt early into the off season and through training camp. The Steelers were left with their Dan Moore as their option, which he was their option before that. And, even when they had to rely on him, he was just that, average, league
yeah.
average. He had over 1,100 snaps at left tackle. Via True Media, he had a 92.5% pass rush win rate. So, take that with a grain of salt. When you look at his run block win rate, 76.2%, which ranks 27th. Once again, depends on what system you want to look at here. But ultimately, paying a guy $31 million guaranteed in year one to play left tackle, moving J.C. Latham over to the right tackle position, does kill two birds with one stone, offering a stable left side while fixing your right side. However, if it doesn't work and he doesn't play at that league average, like it's going to be a problem. Like,
Well,
and
I
they're not
mean,
going to have a lot of time. There's not going to be a lot of leeway coming to this decision. It's not like an Andre Dillard where it was a reclamation project and you had to overpay for that left tackle reclamation project. This is a guy that you're expecting that type of play out from day one. And if
yeah.
you can't get that, and JC Latham has to once again flip-flop sides, and you've now spent this much money on a Lloyd Cushenberry, on a Dan Moore, on Peter Skoronski and JC Latham in the first two rounds, like, it has to work this time, I think is my point.
It's a risky proposition for sure, because I don't think that Dan Moore Jr.'s play is so clean and spotless that you're safely banking on him being the left tackle of the future. Now, I think when you talk about the options in free agency, I do think there were steadier options that were probably a little bit cheaper that they passed on. I get the philosophy of not wanting to take an old dude right now, like Morgan Moses. That's who I had circled. Like, this guy would be awesome as the Titans right tackle, because if you think about this being like a 2 to 4 year rebuild, by the time you get to a good point, you're going to need another tackle, right? Because this guy's probably washed out due to age and dilapidating, that sort of thing. So I get the vision. Like, if you're going to spend for somebody, why not try to get the guy that has some upside? And I think that is the optimistic take here, is that Dan Moore Jr. Improved in 2024 compared to his previous seasons, and you're hoping that this is a player that is on an upward trajectory. But I think there's a lot of flaws in his game. There's a lot of inconsistency to it, and so I don't think that this was necessarily a prudent move to secure that position. And I mean, it is March 11th. We're sitting here talking about this a day after the signing. There is something to be said for being patient, seeing how training camp goes, and revisiting this in November. I get all that, but I guess I'm not going to be surprised if this guy ends up in a competition with a rookie. And for me, that I just don't think that makes this a very prudent move. We can get into I watched a little bit of his tape last night. We can get into my notes if you want to, but
Yeah,
I'll
I think that would be worthwhile because is that consensus of what we've heard from a lot of Pittsburgh media and just kind of the general outrage over, not outrage, but maybe surprise that a guy
yeah.
like Dan Moore got the money he did given the evaluation and the performance. Does that align with what consensus is, or is there something else that you saw on tape that kind of says differently?
Well, I think as usual, I think it's the answer's somewhere in the middle. People that were saying, he's a terrible player, sucks, doesn't help. This is Andre Dillard all over again. I don't think that's true. I was, after seeing the reaction and specifically kind of like scrolling Twitter and seeing what Steelers fans had to say about Dan Moore Jr., was kind of like, oh, this guy must really stink. And then when I watched the tape, I was like, it's not so bad. Like, this guy really is league average for a starting left tackle. But I also don't think that his tape necessarily calls for sunshine and rainbows, like, oh, our left tackle problem is solved, and that sort of thing. I think, again, the hope is that you're able to harness the things that he does well and coach improvement upon the things that he doesn't. I think he's a pretty good mover. I think he looks pretty athletic. He's bursty out of his stance, that sort of thing, but his hands are kind of a mess. They're kind of all over the place. You see him like punching and whiffing outside sometimes, struggles to anchor. There's not a lot of power, sturdiness. It looks like he's always a little late in setting his feet. So when guys get into his chest and drive him back, it takes him a few steps to gather himself to get his feet planted beneath him. And by the time that happens, you're back in the corner of the quarterback's grill. Doesn't have the sturdiest base. Balance looks a little wobbly. I think he does have some nice technique in the run game. I think he gets his hands placed inside. He plays with foot drive, and I think that's where you see the frame, the power come into play. But man, he struggles with guys crossing inside. There's a play in the Chiefs game where the rusher pushes the edge and then crosses right back, kind of baits him into getting out onto the edge and kind of opening that gap between the tackle and the guard. And then when that gap opens, crossing inside. And I swear, like, Moore just kind of like lets him go. Like, just kind of, you literally see the helmet turn. He's just watching the guy cross inside and pressure the quarterback. The quick twitchy guys give him problems, struggle sometimes to hit on the second level blocks. I mean, there's a lot of things that you hope you can fix in him. And if so, he's got the size, he's got the traits to be, like I said, a starting caliber left tackle. And if you get starting caliber left tackle play and you massively upgrade your right tackle position, I get it. It can have an exponential impact on the offense. But I do think that is kind of, we're getting to a point where it has to be a very specific set of circumstances, a very specific series of events for Dan Moore Jr. to hit that ceiling. And that's where I get a little anxious. I get a little nervous.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Not to take away from that conversation, we'll get right back to that, but we do have some Titans breaking news breaking right now. within our show here, where
Oh,
Adam
shit.
Schefter just reported that 4-time All-Pro punter Johnny Hekker reached agreement today on a fully guaranteed 1-year deal with the Tennessee Titans. Hekker will be reunited with Titans special teams coordinator John Fossil, with whom he started his NFL career with in Los Angeles. There you go. And as people in the chat here say, Ed Henry saying major upgrade. Steve Crozio saying, what, we replaced Ryan Stonehouse with Johnny Hekker. Good get. Donnie saying, look alive, major upgrade. Zach saying an actual 4-time All-Pro, but there we go. It goes along with the running theory that with a new special teams coordinator in the building, a guy with the resume of someone like John Bones Fossil, allowing him to kind of build up the room the way he wants is probably the way to go. And that leaves a guy like a fan favorite like Ryan Stonehouse on the cutting room floor. Johnny Hekker, it will now be the Titans' new punter this year. Zach also saying Jacoby Brissett to Arizona. Thank God. We'll get to the quarterbacks towards the end of the show. I want to get through some of the more Dan Moore and Cody Barton before we go on to what the Titans still need to do. But just like when I was on a football show yesterday with Paul Kaharski, like the quarterback options continue to fall. And with every one, it's more and more likely that we're seeing, I don't know. I'm still not sure if it's not Cam Ward what they do, to be honest with you. However, Joe saying let him bone.
Let him bone.
Which we got some bones emojis in the chat here.
I'm
Good
here
to see
for it.
Those.
Johnny Boots, as I've always called him. Johnny
Bone
Boots.
Daddy as well in the chat. Yes,
and I'm sorry, Donnie. I had my notes up with my what's his name, Dan Moore Jr. covering the comments, so I did not see any updates.
Yeah, Dan Moore though, I agree with a lot of what you had to say. It is a good stopgap in year one for the Titans next year, which, to be fair, from a coaching staff perspective, the Titans wanting to address the offensive line as best they can by saying we're done with only having one tackle. Give us both tackles and we'll fix the rest of the roster. Like getting a guy like Dan Moore in there, you have to overpay him, because I know in the comment section here, I do understand the bad team tax in free agency, along with what the overpay of a position. Like Sean O'Reilly here says, overpay, but it's worth it to not see MPF on the field again, which also, by the way, Titans could save $3 million, and that deal looks better if you just cut NPF. I don't know what they're doing.
Or they could keep him and play him at right guard. Come on,
okay.
JT.
Okay. All right. Not today's discussion. I don't think I want to get into that today. If I don't have to talk about MPF for another 5 weeks outside of him getting cut, I'd be good with that. Drew saying it's the bad team tax plus the fact that he was the best offensive tackle in free agency. I guess, yeah, if you're considering a guy like Ronnie Stanley not hitting the market, I guess that is fair. I'd say he's one of the more promising ones in terms of upside that you can get at the position. He's younger than both a guy like Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses by a fair amount. So, as the saying goes, his best ball could still be ahead of him.
Hope so.
But Drew goes on to say, this is why you don't get permanent solutions for tackle in free agency. Good offensive tackles don't hit free agency. And that's kind of also my point, right? We went through this a little bit ago with Mike McGlinchey. There's a reason that the Steelers are moving on after one contract, right? If he was good, we've seen this time and time again with the Philadelphia Eagles. They find their solution. They're going to move other guys around to make it work, right? Like that's what you see with good teams all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this team in the Steelers, clearly, who have been trying to replace him for 2.5 years now with Broderick Jones and Troy Fatanu, obviously we're not going to pay him again. So he makes it to market, and he's the best of the mid, I guess is the best
The
way
best of
to
the
say
mid.
it.
Yeah.
Coach Will's also saying if Arden Key is winning spring reps again, then we should have a conversation. I
Yeah.
agree. Joe also saying every acquisition is a gamble, but is Dan Moore the NWI of tackles?
Maybe. I mean,
That
listen, let's cross our fingers.
Yeah, I think, if that ends up being it for a year, like, and you can get out of the contract later, if he is dependable, if he's fine, if we're not talking about the bookends every single week, I will consider it a win in my book, even though I do
Yeah.
think it is an overpay.
Yeah.
Eddie saying they paid top 10 money to a meh left tackle, name of the game of free agency, but it's not a fun contract to look at, which I agree with. Eddie also saying counterpoint, y'all see how much better the Broncos O-line look when they got a quarterback with a lick of pressure sense this year. I think that's
Yeah.
also fair. And like I said, to the conversation of what this says about where the Titans may be heading with the first overall pick, if you were to take Cam Ward, how does that work into the blocking scheme now? How does that improve a guy like Dan Moore from a statistical standpoint of whose sacks are really who's here?
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say.
And when I'm looking at the sacks, by the way, when I was like watching his tape last night, I don't necessarily look at the sheer volume of sacks that he allows. I'm kind of looking at how bad the sacks that he does allow are, like how disastrous is the impact. And there were a couple times where I was like, you just dropped a bomb on the left side of this offensive line. It was that bad. And I think that's where a little bit of the concern comes from for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Now, moving on before we can look at some of these other comments before we move on from the tackle. Ed Henry saying Duncan at guard, book
I
it.
love it. I love
We
it.
could definitely potentially see that. Joe saying let NPF be a swinger, which
With the pineapple emojis too.
yeah,
If you know, you know.
if you know, you
Not that I
know.
know.
There, not
Not
that
that
you
I
know,
would
but you're
we're
just
not
saying that for other
I'm saying that for
um
other people.
for
Yeah.
other people. That is true. Ed Henry saying Latham. This is another thing. Latham at right tackle over the dregs of humanity is a massive upgrade. Can't be overlooked. I agree. Once again, looking at it in a vacuum, we can talk about Dan Moore, but looking at it from a team building perspective, getting JC Latham to finally anchor that right side, something that and I've gone back and forth on the idea of how important it is now that JC Latham is a right tackle and they spent the 7th overall pick on a right tackle. I don't think it
Mhm.
really matters. That's where I kind of end up on it. And you have a guy like if Dan Moore is that league average, I think it is a great return on investment,
Yeah. I
regardless.
I I'm going to say something here, assuming this is a safe space with everybody. We're just thinking out loud here. But I feel like we should be pressing them a little harder on why they were so eager to move JC Latham back to the right side. Like if you look at the two, I think JC Latham is the better player. Would you not want the better player at left tackle? And I know there's a whole debate about right tackles are just as important now as left tackles and all that. But I think, wouldn't you at least want to have the competition or at least say, hey, we've got two starting caliber tackles. We're going to try some shit in training camp this summer, and we're going to figure out where these guys are best suited to play. But the fact that, one, Paul Kaharski quickly reported yesterday that the intention was indeed to move JC Latham to right tackle. And then I think it was back at the combine, maybe the Senior Bowl, when Brian Callahan said that he was open to the idea of moving JC Latham back to the right side. I'm not insinuating that they think they made a mistake in drafting JC Latham, but I am starting to wonder what their true opinion of JC Latham's rookie season was, because I mean, just automatically kicking him back across the line after you were pretty gung ho about him being the left tackle after you drafted him, for a guy that looks like an average at best starter in the league at left tackle seems a little suspect to me. That's all I'm pointing out.
I think he'll be fine. Like, I think all of that to say, I think he's going to be fine because like Coach Will says here in the chat, his versatility is one of his like best aspects of his game. And he's
Yeah.
going back to a place where in the grand scheme of things over the last 4 to 5 years, he's played more right tackle than he has left tackle. And that may be more comfortable for him. And saying, when you look at it, saying, if we can get a guy who is maybe more comfortable now from the get-go with 1 year of experience in the NFL to go back to the right side while also finding an option on the left to solidify both, why wouldn't we do that? You know, like
Yeah.
I
Fair
think that's a
enough.
fair argument. However, I do think that there's something in the back of my mind that worries me. And Latham, you know, he's going to work. I don't think
Yeah.
Latham really matters either way. What we've learned from him in his character and whatnot over the last season, like, dude's just going to go out there and play ball because he wants to play ball. So
And and
if you tell
maybe
me he's going to play right, he's going to play right. Like,
yeah, maybe that is their thinking too. Is like, this dude is a pro, he's a ball player. We're gonna move him to right because, like, as Eddie points out, Moore might not have the ability to switch sides. He might not be um that versatile, but they know, like, okay, we're going to do this because we know Dan Moore's a left tackle, and we also know in the back of our minds that if shit gets sideways at left tackle, we can always move JC back and he can handle it.
last thing on the offensive line before we move to the defense, Paul says Travis Hunter approach, just play Tavondre
Do it.
at right guard.
Do
Hey,
it.
Tavondre at right guard with John Njoku as the wing tight end
Yeah.
on the left side. I think
Jalen
we're
Duncan at
cooking.
defensive tackle. Let's go.
Yeah. D Good says, how dare you guys not stop everything and talk about the new Titans punter? That's because we already talked about the new Titans punter, D Good.
Yeah, you missed it, bud. Come on.
Sorry. I
Johnny
get it.
Boots.
Johnny Boots. What was it? Let Fossil Bone? Is that what we're calling him?
Yeah.
Let Fossil Bone is what we're
Yeah.
going with. The other signing, big signing that wasn't a already former Titan or bringing them back. Linebacker, Cody Barton.
Mhm.
This was another position of need where there were quite a few guys who I thought could make this roster a lot better. We've talked
Yeah.
about over the last 2.5 seasons how bad the Titans are missing a good coverage linebacker. And when you have guys like Terrell Dotson, you have guys like Dre Greenlaw out there. The Titans were reportedly very, very interested in Dre Greenlaw and wanting to look at look at this market as an opportunity to get better. They miss out on some of those guys. And even though there is some guys still out there, Tyrod Dotson is still available, they elect to go with Cody Barton from the Denver Broncos.
Man.
Once again, it's not a signing that excites me. And
I'm
thank you.
so
Here before we get into that, here's some stats on a guy
okay.
like Cody Barton. And these come by way of our good friend here in the chat, Zach Lyons. Cody Barton on minimum 600 defensive snaps amongst 55 linebackers. He is has the 10th highest reception rate, 85.7%. Second lowest missed tackle rate, something that he does very well. He's a good tackler. He's good in the run game. Like, this is a guy who excels at that part of the game. However, where he doesn't, or maybe he doesn't as well, is in coverage. 102.7 passer rating allowed last season. Murray was a 131.3 passer rating. 42nd in defensive stops with 34. 54th in defense stop rate, 3%. Tied 13th highest yards per reception. Had only 2 tackles for loss. 28th in average depth of tackle, 3.6, and 49th in run stop rate, 4.7. Now, they signed him to a 3-year deal, $21 million for basically an AAV of $7 million, which, to give them credit, this is not that big of a signing in terms of money.
Mm-hmm.
It is 7 is the new 5 is what I've heard around the league. Like, that is with the cap and it continuing to go up. Like that is where it's going. However, he's not, and Drew says Barton is a victim of PFF's abysmal grading system. He's not Fred Warner, but he's a hell of a lot better than he gets credit for in coverage. I think there's still a lot missing with a guy like Cody Barton if he's going to be your newest cover linebacker. And if you pair him with Kenneth Murray, that's great. He's better than Kenneth Murray. Let's just give that. Let's be clear on that. However, when you look at this, would I have rather, and I know they were in on Dre Greenlaw. If they got in Dre Greenlaw, I would have said this is a home run.
Yeah,
Like
me
this
too.
is, and they reportedly were. However, it just leaves me still unsatisfied that you have Cody Barton, Kenneth Murray on the roster, and potentially a guy who at his best can be better than both of them in coverage, and a guy like Cedric Gray. Like if you don't have him on the field like that, and you're sticking with Kenneth Murray and Cody Barton, are you like how capped are you still in your ability to cover the middle of the field? That's my concern with a signing like Cody Barton.
Yeah, I would echo that concern. Now, I do want to preface this. I didn't get any time in the last 24 hours to watch tape on Cody Barton, so I want to refrain from making any like broad sweeping statement about him before I have the chance to watch the tape, but smart people that have watched the tape have said, he is sort of a key and diagnose linebacker. And to borrow a term from our old pal Easton Freeze, who mentioned the spine of the defense and what happened to the spine of the defense once players like Ernest Jones IV and Quandre Diggs were no longer on this team. I think I can get on board with signing a guy that is going to bolster the run defense because it wasn't very good down the stretch in 2024. I think the concern that I would have with a player like Cody Barton is that who's going to cover the middle of the field? And that is where it's like, all right, like I hear you, Drew. He's better in coverage than he gets credit for. I just want to see it before I believe it. But it still seems like we're not really tipping the scales in the complete other direction in terms of style of linebacker. Now, I don't have to go get Fred Warner, but I would just feel a little more comfortable about the defense if they did have a guy that was trustworthy to go out there and rangy enough to just run sideline to sideline and cover guys. So that's kind of where I'm at with the signing. I don't think it's doom and gloom. I think they do need some help in run support, but you look at the coverage, the reputation in coverage, and I think it raises questions. So and by the way, I'm sick to my stomach that they lost out on Dre Greenlaw. Watching those Niners linebackers, man, people that say linebackers not important, watch those two in that defense and tell me they're not important.
And it very well might have been the to the effect where David Brown says, of course, Greenlaw didn't play all last year, wanted a lot of
Yeah,
money. He gets what, 4 to 5 million more. Like you get $4 to $5 million more for Dre Greenlaw. He doesn't fit the Titans' timeline of a rebuild. I would have argued I would have been able to when talking about an overpay, I would have overpaid for a guy like Dre Greenlaw to come in here, bring that leader aspect, bring
sure.
a fill a need that the Titans really need to get better at. But unfortunately, they're kind of handicapped because there still is an $8 million Kenneth Murray on the roster. And you can't really put $20 million worth like towards linebackers
Yeah,
on your team. That's just not
fair
how
enough.
it's going to work. And so if this is the best they can do, I think it's an improvement. However, like Drew says, it's, feels like this should be a bet on Gray. I feel much better if Gray is next to him. If this is supposed to be the guy filling in next to Kenneth Murray, it's much less enticing. I don't see personally how you're paying Kenneth Murray $8 million this year to not be on the field for the majority of the time.
Yeah.
Which is why, when looking at the things that Kenneth Murray and a guy like Cody Barton do, it's a lot. It's pretty similar. Like there are similarities there. How much are you capped once again by having those two as your middle linebackers?
JT, are you hearing any rumblings about the status of Kenneth Murray? Because I know we've talked about him like as a popular, like potential cut candidate, maybe cap savings, cap casualty, that sort of thing. I mean, is the opportunity still open for him to be off this team and for them to keep shuffling that linebacker room, you think?
I think it depends. I've not heard too much on their opinion of Kenneth Murray
Yeah.
recently. I like I said, either way. However, if we get into next season here, like he still very much could be released. And, you know, with having about 40-ish, maybe 35, 40-ish $40 still in cap, how much does that really affect? Do they need to cut him to be a cap casualty? I think our time is past that, for them to, and once again, you're paying him $8 million this year. You're probably only going to save about 3, 4-ish $million of that
Yeah.
in cap saving. And Joe says, replace him with who? It's not replacing him. It's, if you want a good coverage linebacker while still complementing that coverage with someone who stops the running and can be that thumper in the back, in the middle of the secondary there in terms of linebackers, having a guy like Cody Barton, Cedric Gray could potentially step up if that's who they think he can be. If that's not, and that's probably why they're keeping Kenneth Murray, because Cedric Gray still has a long way to go in his development. If it is Cody Barton and it is Kenneth Murray, like I think we're still there with like having those two as your guys. However, your ceiling is still your ceiling is still capped, I think, with a Cody Barton.
Yeah, for sure. I was just curious because we're kind of going through the iterations of how they could combine these guys and all the different permutations of this linebacker room, and I'm like, well, I wonder if that option is just still on the table for them.
Yeah, David Brown says post June 1st and carry over the cap savings into 2026, I think is could be possible. Real quick before we get to a couple other things, because I know we're coming up on the hour mark, yapping away. Good conversation to have with you all today. Appreciate you guys all being here. Other Titans that have been signed: Morgan Cox, Darrell Baker Jr., Mike Brown, Andrew Rupsich, and Sebastian Joseph Day. I'm glad they brought back Joseph Day. I think that's someone they needed to.
Me too.
I think that depth is important there. Mike Brown is fine for a depth. I thought he played well last season. Darrell Baker, same way. Morgan Cox, death taxes, and Morgan Cox back on a 1-year deal. Andrew Rupsich is an interesting one, but I think it's fine for re-signing for depth. They're all depth signings, but I think those are solid ones. Specifically Darrell Baker Jr. and Mike Brown and Sebastian Joseph Day. I think those three are good depth, which does we're gonna have to regulate some of these sayings now with Team Ramrod here in the chat. I don't know where the line is that for the 440 Sports Podcast Network, and I know someone called us the bad boys of sports podcasting, but I don't know. Is there may be a line for us as well? I mean, your thoughts on those signings that the Titans are bringing back, those 5 guys in particular.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think Darrell Baker Jr. is a fine depth piece. I think he showed up in critical moments and performed admirably for a guy that you want to be like your 5th or 6th cornerback in the rotation, that you need him certain spots to come in and fill in for an injury. I thought he played pretty well. I've still got a clip from the Minnesota game where he goes one-on-one with Justin Jefferson and keeps him from scoring a touchdown. Like, there's some good stuff on Darrell Baker Jr.'s tape that I'm hyped for. Mike Brown was a really good depth piece. Guy that you can still develop, maybe has some upside. I think he's also a key contributor on special teams as well. So that helps out that unit as well. Improving the bone zone is obviously a top priority. And then Sebastian Joseph Day. Sebastian Joseph Day was a guy that we had circled quite a while ago as a kind of an unsung hero on that defensive front, and a guy that they needed to bring back to keep that core of Joseph Day, Simmons, and Sweat together.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Which leads us to the last thing I want to talk about, and I think we'll table more of the conversation about what this means for the Titans at 1, and seeing, we'll probably, as the week gets going and we're back on Friday, we'll get more, of those depth pieces signings, and we can start to really see this roster take shape, and see where those holes are. What do the Titans still need to do though in free agency? Because you
Oh,
you
brother.
you you have, address some needs. I actually it was a little more dire. I was going to go into this segment a little more dire than I am now, because we talk about Ryan Stonehouse, we say our farewells, and welcome Johnny Hekker. So that one is taken care of. The bone zone works fast. It is a quick,
Yeah.
it's quick in the bone zone.
Let
Uh,
fossil bone.
yeah. What do the Titans still need? Like Eddie says, I don't know about y'all, but I'm hyped for Bryce Oliver, wide receiver too.
Who you gonna get
Um,
though as a free agent? Who you gonna get? I mean, I feel like the wide receiver is growing in import of draft needs.
yeah, I mean it, and that's such an interesting one, right? Because with how Chad Brinker and Mike Bergonzi attack wide receiver in the draft, we've seen in now, maybe this is a spin, and there's a guy that will be there. If like I said, I'm with Joe here that he says wide receiver going to be a 4th round pick. I still think that is where they are. Team Renrod says Justin Hardy needs to stay in the bone zone. I know you said something about Justin Hardy maybe on the move as well. Like that's
Well,
someone
it
to
just
watch.
a reporter for the Denver Post said that the Broncos have reached out to him. So nothing
Oh,
official yet, but that is a guy that really bolstered the special teams unit a year ago that I
maybe a
would like to
reunion,
see back.
because I think with the Denver Gazette asking, it seems like there may be strong connections for Ryan Stonehouse to move uh to the Broncos, which could
Is
be a
that right?
reunion. Justin Hardy and
Oh boy.
and Ryan Stonehouse reunion. But yeah, wide receiver. There's going to be options at 235,
Hmm.
2.35.
There we go.
Yeah, right. I didn't want people to think I'm thinking 7th round, that there's going to be options. Like there's going to be options. Brew McCoy, I think, is
Yeah.
one where they could start. At 2.35, there is options, right? And however, we've looked at what the Titans still need. And if they do end up going Cam Ward there at 1, you're sitting at 2.35. Like, can you afford to take a wide receiver when we still don't know how they're going to address the edge position on this team? Like, what, like, there, I think that there is reason to believe that um, you can still go out and get, um, a bunch of edge rushers in the draft. Like there's room
Yeah.
down the line. However, like wide receiver is that it's a tightrope in that
Hmm.
aspect here. And so you look at who is still available out there. Um, David Brown. We're going off the rails here, but if you look at the guys who are still out here, Stephon Diggs, no, I'm not doing that. Keenan Allen, no. Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams, all these guys over 30 do not fit the bill of what the Titans need in this rebuild. Then you start to
Yeah.
look at guys like Deontay Johnson,
Nope.
like Demarcus Robinson, Devin Duvernay for special teams, DJ Chark. Do you bring back Tyler Boyd? I don't know about that. There's still guys out there who I really do like. I like Rondale Moore. I like Olamide Zaccheaus. These Noah Brown even out there. These role playing type of wide receivers who I think, because they have not been signed yet, I don't think it's the end of the world. These are guys who you don't expect to sign on day one. So, but like some of the guys that I thought could have been impact players and could have helped this rebuild along, like a Josh Palmer. I know there was talk about a guy like De'Ami Brown. The guy like Mac Hollins was one of my favorites. These are guys who are moved who have moved on and have already found new homes. So it's interesting how they attack this wide receiver market, because as of right now, like like if you add like just one receiver or two receivers in the draft, I still don't think you can go into a year with Calvin Ridley, two rookies, Bryce Oliver and Traylon Burks. Like I
Yeah,
don't think you can do
oh
that
boy.
because Colton Dow as well, Jaquan, you can't do that. You need to bring in someone with veteran NFL experience, and I don't know where that's going to come from.
Yeah, I really don't either. Drew brings up Elijah Moore, an intriguing slot option. Uh, yeah, I mean, there are some guys, Noah Brown. I know our buddy Zach is big on Greg Dortch as well. I
I'd
mean,
love to
there's
get Dorched in the bone zone, that's for sure.
there we go. It's by the way, I a quick aside. The chat has ruined my brain so much that I see our friend Paul drop in with "Gotta go edge," and I don't know if he's talking about edge rusher or not. I don't know what the chat's on today. I digress. I don't know that any of these man, I don't know that any of these free agent options are like you want an experienced guy, but like what are these guys going to cost and like what's the real impact they can have on the passing attack? I think is how you look at this. And I don't know. One more name I'd throw out there. I know he got his brain scrambled on the field last season, but Grant DeBose is still out there on my hidden gems list from a couple years ago in the draft. I don't think he even made $800,000 for the Dolphins last year. And you know what? Call him up, find upside wherever you can.
Yeah, which leads us to then the other most likely pick at 2.35, edge. What do they do there? Obviously, under contract right now, they have Arden Key and they have Jalen Harrell.
Jalen
I mean,
Harrell season, baby.
that's pretty much it. Do they need to bring in do they need to look into this veteran edge market and find someone? I think
Yeah,
they would do well to bring one in. Azeez Ojulari is someone who's out there who I think they could
absolutely.
still potentially look at. I think if they weren't interested in the veteran market of a Hassan Reddick, of a Chase Young, Josh Sweat, I don't think that means they'd be interested in a Von Miller or Joey Bosa or Matt
Sure.
Judon or one of those guys. The one older guy who I think could, if he wanted to play on a team friendly deal, Zadarius Smith is a guy who I think
Mhm.
is an interesting look. Given that the Lions want to get younger, he's a guy who you could bring in as a rotational piece. But ultimately, if it is Cam Ward at one, like I find it hard that they do not end up wanting to go edge at 2.35. And so how they address those is very interesting. Which is there any guys before we move on to the quarterback and get out of here after that you
Yeah,
want
I
to
mean,
bring up?
I like Azeez Ojulari a lot. He's been a name that's been high on my list as kind of the best of both worlds. Probably not going to break the bank. Good value. Definitely has some injury concerns. I won't dispute that, but has a lot of speed as a pass rusher when he's healthy. Has Joseph Osai landed anywhere? I haven't. I've been kind of out of the game a little bit today, displaced with the day job, so I haven't seen his name pop up. But he's another guy, speedy pass
Yeah, he
rusher.
went back to the Bengals.
Did he? And then I haven't heard any word on Joe Tryon Choyinka either. And I know like he hasn't really been productive like at all since some early flashes as a rookie, but he's long, he's got the physical traits. I kind of circle his name because he played in a Todd Bowles defense, just kind of, modeled.
Is he the Buccaneer?
Yeah, the Buccaneer.
I think he went back. I think he
Oh, great.
just went back to the
I'm
Buccaneers.
just spewing old information here on the show
Listen,
live on.
I had the same because I went into a football show yesterday and I was there for an hour and like the Sam Darnold news dropped, the Justin Field news dropped, and I come out of it and I was or signed with Cleveland, I guess, with the Browns.
Damn.
I came out of a football show yesterday and I was like, I really would like, it'd be interesting to see the Titans target Diami Brown. And everybody's like, Diami Brown signed already. I'm like, guys, I've been out of the loop.
Yeah,
Like, it's a whirlwind.
it
Give me some
sucks.
credit. Yeah, I think they have to sign one. And then what they do with the quarterback is interesting
Oh,
because the
brother.
options are it's getting dire. Let's just say that, right? And so you look at who is still out there. Jacoby Brissett signing with the Arizona Cardinals. You're
Mhm.
looking at the reports that Mason Rudolph, the Titans are interested in bringing him back. Does he really want to
Ooh,
be back? I've heard conflicting reports there on what that is. However, like we're at the point where Richard's saying retention pond Levis may actually be battling for the starting job if it is not Cam Ward, because right now, like you're down to a room that even if you do take Cam Ward, you're down to a room of Cam Ward, Will Levis, and one of Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, Mason Rudolph, Taylor Heineke, Drew Lock. That is what you're doing. And like we've seen some like backup guys come off the board. Nick Mullins goes to the Jaguars, Josh Dobbs to the Patriots, Daniel Jones ends up in Indianapolis, Zach Wilson to Miami. Like it's getting dire. Like
here's the wild card in the whole thing, JT. The Titans trade for Anthony Richardson. And that they're talking about Richardson might be on the trade block.
Bring in Anthony Richardson and have a room of Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and Cam Ward.
Oh man, I'm just joking,
God.
chat. I'm just joking before the chat blows up.
If you had to ask me, like, what I would want, like, if you're bringing back Mason Rudolph at this point, like,
man.
is it even worth it to take Cam Ward? I'm on the train now that probably is Cam Ward at 1, but like at that point, just like if you're bringing back Mason Rudolph and that's your room, like if Cam Ward goes down, you're just in the same spot that you already were, so you might as well just thug it out for one more year and then and then get the quarterback next year. But those three are the most interesting ones to me. And then what they do at guard, I think they're going to find a guard in this market. That's one that it was very high. The guard market was very lucrative. It's cooled down. I don't think it's a dire need right now. I mean, hell, we saw Sadiq Charles get signed like a month later than when free agency started, and then he ended up saying, I don't want to play football anymore. So maybe it's better to wait, I guess, to find your replacement at guard. However, wide receiver, edge, and quarterback are now where they need to turn their attention to, and I think we will see them supplement with depth this week. It's just a matter of who at this point and for what the price is. And they still have money. Joe brings up, I don't think Russell Wilson will be, I think Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, those two are going to the Giants and to the Steelers. It just depends on which goes where, I think is where they are. So,
how do we feel about a Marcus Mariota reunion? Because I've seen like I don't know if it's just cope or if people are just pivoting as all the dominoes fall around us, but
it would be weird.
It would be weird.
It'd be weird.
Yeah.
It'd be weird. And it doesn't make you feel good, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't make you feel good. It's weird. And he's back. And you're like, man, we're back to the same place that when you left. Like, like, I don't know. The bottom line, like, I know this was not a free agency class that was supposed to be exciting. However, I still do feel like, I still do feel as if this team has not made much movement towards getting on track for the rebuild. And I think that's a little worrisome, but I think as this roster continues to build itself up and we get to the draft and we see how they supplement through the draft, we may have a better picture. But right now, I still just feel underwhelmed with what they've done in free agency in terms of their big spending.
Yeah, I mean, I think the optimist here would say, let's hang tight and revisit how we're feeling about this in a week or so.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. And
who knows? Could be Azeez Ojulari in a Titans uniform.
And I'd probably feel a lot better. At that point. So
maybe
we just need to take a deep breath.
This game of chicken ends and Brandon Sheriff comes down on the price tag and maybe he's in the two-tone blue and we've re-signed Nick Westbrook-Akine and maybe all is right with the world. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Only one way to find out, and that's on hopefully Friday's show. So we have more to talk about. We'll be back then talking once again everything about free agency and maybe some topics about where the other quarterbacks landed, what that means for the Titans and the 101. Thank you to ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers, 7 wonderful locations in the greater Nashville area. Might head out to ML Rose. I'm going to see Mickey 17 tonight, Stoney, but
Oh,
may
loved
make
it.
a stop at ML Rose before that. Sinkers Beverages as well. Shop Sinkers at www.sinkersbeverages.com. 4-time liquor store, best in Nashville liquor store of the year. Check them out. Find them on Uber Eats. They drive so you can drink responsibly. We'll be back on Friday. But until then, enjoy being in the Bone Zone because this has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you later. Have a good week.
Bone dogs bark the loud.